As a Conservative, I was getting a little bit worried a fortnight ago as it appeared to me that Sir Keir Starmer was doing really surprisingly well. What do I mean by this? Because obviously he's the leader of the opposition, he's not somebody I wish to see doing well electorally, but he was essentially copying the Tony Blair approach, which, as we all remember, won Labour 3 elections in a row with big majorities. What was this copying of Blair? Well, it was essentially stealing Tory promises and trying to minimise the threat to interests of people up and down the country. So you get a promise of no tax increases. Why? Because that reassures a lot of better-off Tory voters that they won't be penalised. Then he opposed Sadiq Khan's ULEZ expansion, showing or trying to show that he was on the side of the motorists, taking up a Tory cause in some ways, which it has to be said the Tories haven't been as good at as I would have liked. And then he had a reshuffle that promoted the Blairites in his party, making it clear that he was essentially unthreatening, friendly, middle of the road. But since then, it seems to me that he has stumbled. His first big mistake came last week when he went off to Holland and seemed to commit to a huge increase in asylum seekers coming into the UK. Now, this wasn't how he phrased it, obviously. What he said is that I will stop the boats coming by having a returns agreement with the continent. But in return, I will share the continent's pain by taking a number of people directly into this country who are asylum seekers to the continent of Europe as a whole. This was quickly calculated to be about double the number who arrive illegally. So his approach with the EU seemed to be, I'll actually increase the numbers coming in, when we know that the British electorate want to see the numbers reduced. There then seemed to be a bit of a U-turn over the weekend. So that was a major mistake. It frightened people. It made people think he wasn't serious about migration and that the policies he would follow would have the wrong consequence. Then, in his further travels, he suggested that he wants to renegotiate Brexit. Now, why does this matter? Well, most people had hoped that Brexit had finally been closed down as a subject, that the negotiations had happened, the political disruption that they had caused, the political hostility that they'd caused. There are still people shouting outside Parliament. There's been a tone of British politics that has been quite tough during the Brexit negotiation period that only recently has begun to calm down, so people don't want that. But renegotiation is code for shadowing what the EU does. Coming from a man who's always been a starry-eyed Europhile. He was, of course, the champion of the second referendum. Why do you champion a second referendum? Because you believe the voters got it wrong the first time and need to be given a second choice. And now he wants to do it by stealth, because renegotiation leads to dynamic alignment, essentially that we would shadow the EU without being a member, making us, like Norway, a rule taker without the democratic accountability that we now have for our laws by being an independent nation state outside the EU. So it would restore the democratic deficit. Starmer, by aping Blair, was trying to make more conservative, cautious voters back him, or at least stay at home. But this not-so-subtle backdoor return to the EU is a big mistake, along with the suggestion of increased migration, and shows he cannot be trusted and would even risk the election for the sake of his Europhilia.